So I'm 12 years old, barely, and the other kid was a towering 13-year-old, and he was getting ready to kick into my backside. So we all have stories like these, but hear mine because this one was a big deal. It was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. And I remember being surrounded by all the other kids in the neighborhood. The peer pressure was on, right? And there was this big guy, and his name was Jack. And one of my buddies made a smart aleck comment about him, laughing at him. And I turned to acknowledge my buddy. And out of the corner of my eye, here comes Jack's fist. And it's coming at me. Well, because I saw it, I pulled back, and his hand landed on the back of my neck, and he got a hold of my jacket. It was a blue jean jacket. And at the time, the movie Billy Jack had been released. And Billy Jack was this cool character back. It's a corny movie today, but back then it was cool. And he wore a blue jean jacket, and he was a martial artist, and he could do all this stuff. And when his hand fell on my jacket, I pulled away, but he held on as long as he could. And I finally pulled free, and he let go, but not before my jacket had my arms pinned behind my back. And so as I turned and he advanced, I had no defense on my upper body. Well, my dad had put me in karate class for years. And at that time, I could pretty much do a split. I did a lot of this. And the training kicked in. I threw what's called a roundhouse. It was a right kick that swooped around, slapped him across the face, and laid the kid out. Everything stopped. All the kids ran in, and they're pumped because of that moment. Well, I was terrified because I knew he was bigger than me and stronger than me. And, karate will get you so far. It's not like MMA that they do today. Back then, it was mostly stand-up stuff, punches and kicks and things like that. Well, the next day at the school bus, as we're waiting on the school bus, here comes Jack with this big shiner on his eye. But he was the nicest guy. I was still trying to avoid him because I knew he could take me. If it ever went to the ground, I'm done. But peace was made. He never bothered me anymore. And I was established as somebody could take care of themselves, right? Well, I was terrified the whole time. I wasn't anticipating this. But the interesting thing was, and the reason I'm telling this story is, I was prepared for that situation. Now, how could you ever prepare for an exact situation? In karate, do they teach you when your jacket is got your arms pinned behind your back move? No such move exists, not that I'm aware of. But what happens is through practice of all these other things, you improvise, you adapt, and you're able to adjust to the situation at hand, which, for a 12-year-old kid, it was a big deal. But even as an adult, the reason we're able to adapt to situations that are presented to us is because we have these fundamental trainings under our belt and these basic exercises in our rearview mirror that we can call upon as experience. And so one of the things I wanted to try to divert this over to, and I'm gonna share a document here in a second. So if you're driving, you can pause at that point, but just be careful. One of the things is, right now, I've been talking about this for a long time. We're coming into this economic transition, and Pete's going to put a program together. Actually, we're adapting this program here. You can see the process. This is the HVAC Greatness program. We're adapting this for exactly what's coming on. This is ideal. Guys, Pete had his business during the crappiest part of the state because he didn't think to do demographic research. And Pete started his business during the recession, at the end of the recession, actually in the middle of the recession, back in 1989. And I know you guys don't remember that, but times were tough. And you're talking about being motivated when you're out there and you're doing the hustle and people don't want to pay and you're in a tight economy because it's not the best demographic, and it was a we called it a mill town back then. And what happened was the textile industries that made yarns and materials for clothing and T-shirts and all this other stuff had big factories over there, and they paid these employees just these low hourly rates, and they didn't make a lot of money, but that was the area that my mother had moved to when she remarried because her husband ran a plant over there. And so we moved to be close by, and I would commute into the big city, for work. But when I started my business, I just set up where I happened to live, mistake number one, and I had to deal with that. But it did prepare me for tougher times. I know what it's like to get out there and hustle, guys. And I know what it's like when all the easy leads and the big jobs, big change outs, when that stuff dries up. I know what I have to do. And it's for that reason that I feel particularly qualified to speak to this topic, because not only have I done that in the United States, I have seen how third world countries, right, banana republic countries, run their heating and air conditioning. And it's not, I should say they operate heating and air conditioning businesses. And it's not what you think. And it's not good, right? Now, there in those particular communities outside of the country, there were champions. There were some companies that were very prosperous. But the average heating and air guy, I'll describe it to you one day, but it wasn't much. They're not making anything. They're basically squeezed out of the profits, and they're just used for commodity style level labor. And so, as I mentioned, I want to bring up a sheet. So there's a few dynamics that we want to understand if we're going to be competitive. Number one is we have to take care of this. This is your ability to be perceived as great. Okay. This is your HVAC greatness. HVAC greatness isn't about Pete. It's about helping you put a process together so that people can appreciate just how good you are and why you're worth more. And if you think that's important now, wait until next year this time. Wait until we get this, slap across the face in the markets and in the economy and the things that are to come. And I know for some of you, and I did not know this, for some of you, you're not even aware of this. You're not even aware that we're getting ready to get kicked in the, what, financially in the United States and Canada. We're already seeing a piece of this. We're already seeing the inflation and people start to pull back. But when it is fully realized, a lot of heating and air guys they're not going to be prepared. And if they don't have the basic fundamentals to adjust to the situation, like, little old 12-year-old Pete trying to, take on this 13-year-old monster, it seemed like it. When you're 12 years old, somebody in the fifth grade, I think there was, somebody in the sixth grade, that was a big deal, or the seventh grade, whatever it was. But somebody a year ahead, it's a big deal, and it's terrifying. Well, the unknown tends to be terrifying, but as we move forward in business, one of the things that we have to complement our greatness development and being able to be valued is understanding our numbers well enough. I mean, just fundamentally that you can adjust them. If your pricing is based on just a straight up GP, because that's what everybody taught you to do, and you don't understand precisely how to get to that GP, then it can kind of, you're not going to be prepared. You don't have those fundamental training to adapt to the coming giant that's going to be coming out to whoop your backside in this situation that's coming. And it is coming, guys. And I know, I don't like to be too negative on this stuff, but it's just a reality. It's coming. So let's talk about this. This is a document that I created. Now, by the way, I use a retired gentleman's basic pricing for replacement as well as for service. And I use those a little differently than is preached out there. Overhead is what it costs you to operate your business. It's all those expenses outside of what we call direct costs. So a direct cost would be whatever it costs to get that job done. And so let's say you're changing out a 2.5 ton heat pump condensing unit an air handler. Well, what it costs to get that job done will be the cost of the equipment, maybe the pad and the line set, maybe a new thermostat, some transitional ductwork, materials, this, that, and the other, even oxygen, acetylene, and nitrogen. All this stuff is part of the direct cost, but it isn't limited to the equipment and materials. There's also, well, did I have to pay for a permit? Did I have to pay for maybe an electrician, a subcontractor to come in and do part of that my license won't allow me to do? What about paying the people to do the work? And this one, if you guys are owner operators, a lot of times you don't charge for your own time. And that is a mistake. And because the money has to come from somewhere. So part of that direct cost is what we call direct labor. Okay. And so we call this, oh gosh, what do we call it? Cost of goods sold, COGS. And so COGS are your equipment, your materials, the subs, sales taxes, if you pay taxes at the counter, direct labor, and then permits and things like this. Anything that it costs you to do that job. Now, there's another piece in there that's kind of separate, that is kind of directly involved, and that's your vehicle, the gasoline to get over there, right? And then how much time that vehicle's sitting on the job site. And so we actually break that out as a separate line item. Okay, so that's your direct costs. But then you have what's called overhead costs. And that's everything like the rent, the lights, the staff inside your owner's salary, which there's a KPI on that, 5% of gross revenues. So $1 million business would have an owner drawing 5% or $50,000, which isn't much. But if he's billing for his direct labor time as well, because he's an owner operator, and then we factor in these other ways of making money, like, what about the net profit on $1 million? Well, net profit, if you're 20%, that's $200,000. That's yours too. So it's not like you're only making 50, right? Or maybe you rent your building back to yourself and you financially benefit from that and things like this. So there's a lot of pieces here when it comes into calculating the total cost of operating a business and doing a job, and how do we do this in a way that the bills get paid on a consistent basis in a business of inconsistent demand. And so this takes a little bit of strategy, actually a whole lot of strategy, and creating demand when there is none is key, right? During your shoulder seasons, you need to have processes in place that continue to bring you work. But as the times get tough and the business demands change, your customer behavior changes because they're under different circumstances, your business must adapt. Okay, you must adapt. And so if you understand these fundamental areas, direct costs, and what I wanted to talk about was how to calculate direct labor and how to calculate overhead for that direct labor, and then how to break that out down by department and by technician. And ultimately, what about the vehicles? Because that's one of those variable overheads, right? It goes up when we're really busy, it goes down when we're not, but there's still a monthly amount that has to be in there as kind of like an extended overhead, a separate overhead. So the moving pieces are that. Once you've established numbers for a given business model, a mix, let's say you did 80% of your revenues came from replacement and 20% came from service. I'm just making this up. And all of a sudden, this is what's coming, people are pulling back. I don't think I'm going to replace that this year. Let's just fix it, or let's just put it off. And so we've already seen manufacturing, or we've already heard manufacturing are pulling back. And what they're going to do, what's happening is they're producing less equipment because they're actually selling less at the big levels. At your level, you may not even be feeling this yet, but rest assured, it's coming and it's coming soon. And so we need to be prepared, little Pete out there, with a series of different skill sets that allow you to adapt for the situation. And it starts with understanding your numbers, but it also is going to include processes that are designed to make sure that you have work and you're billable and you're not just depending on what we always traditionally have. And number one is demand, driven by extreme temperatures. And number two is creating interest through marketing, and specifically right now, digital marketing. And digital marketing agencies are very popular. They've come into our space because they have a little skill set that you don't. And so they actually, in many cases, make more money off of your work than you do, depending on how you're set up. Right? Is that fair? I don't know. It's what the market drives, right? It's a genuine skill set that we need, right? But what they don't have is they don't have a marketing strategy, not a real one. I mean, they all follow pretty much the same thing. Get your message in front of a prospective client who has a heating and air conditioning need and entice them with some type of a special. And it's usually money or a rebate and whatnot. Or maybe it's just your general message. But if that's the only message that you have, well, then now it's all about money. And that is a race that I've mentioned before that you don't want to win, because that's a race to the bottom. And what's worse than winning the race to the bottom is coming in second place. I forget where I heard that. I thought that was so funny. But okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here with you on this. And this is a document that I created, and these numbers are not genuine. But basically, what we do is we project our revenues out, and we actually have to know what our overhead is. Now, we try to keep that below 30%. This is a fictitious number. And right here, we've split that 50%, the red part here, of this overhead, we're going to allot that to the installation department. So installers, you got to pay $167,500 this year on top of, that's your contribution to paying the bills, the office, the rent, salaries. Well, the service department in this example, we gave them the same amount, and that's over here in green. So these red lines are installation, these green lines are service. And I mentioned vans are separate, trucks are separate. That's the gray down here. Okay. So when I created this, and this is not a functional spreadsheet. There's not mathematical formulas in here. It's just something that lays out and allows you to understand this. What we did is we took the installer and the assistant, line 6 and line 7, and we said, okay, if we pay them $50 an hour and we pay them for 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, well, that's $114,400 over a period of the year, right? Well, but what does it cost us to pay them 50? Well, it may cost you 55, 60, or whatever, depending on the benefits, but you have to match things like Social Security and things like this. So when you say you're paying somebody 50, I'd figure at least 10% more on that. It's really costing you 55 to pay them 50. Okay. But the point is, if we multiply this out and we get the whole year, this is what we have to pay them. Well, the problem is they're not working every workday of a 52-week work year. So we have to back out vacation time, paid holidays, and downtime or non-productive time. And you kind of come up with this number. And what happens is you realize if we, for example, had only 1,500 billable hours for our installer, and that's pretty much installing 4 days a week, 50 weeks a year. That's how we come up with that number. In order to pay him what we're going to have to pay for the whole year, well, our direct man hour cost on that is really $76.27. If that makes sense. So we do the same thing for the helper, and we come up with a total of a crew hour and a crew day. Okay. But the point is that this is how we figure, and these numbers may be realistic, they may not be. So don't get hung up on what they are. Don't copy these numbers. This is just made up. But the point is, it really depends on what you're paying, right? Or what it costs you to pay. It costs on how many hours, right? And then how much of that overhead they actually consume. Is it 50%? Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. All right. Or how much can we allot? And so that's what we do. Well, if we only have a single installation crew, that means that all $167,000 is pinned to that one crew. And so they've got to be billing another $111 an hour on top of the direct costs just for the overhead, right? So that we put the overhead, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I alluded to this at the beginning, we put this at the labor level, not on parts and pieces. Most of your competition is marking up parts and pieces. That's okay if you can accurately predict those. I suggest that you cannot. I'm suggesting that if you put your overhead on labor, like what we're doing here, you're always good because that's the constant. Equipment costs are going to go up, they're going to go down, depends on the job, but you need to get your hourly rate right, and we got to cover this overhead as well. Same thing is true for service. You may pay them 50, but it's going to cost you 55, and they're not billable 1,500 hours. You're good to be 50% billable. You're good. You're good to be 50% efficient. In other words, on a 40-hour week, what you've actually got billed in your flat rate pricing, you're fortunate if you have 20 hours. Right? You're doing good. Okay, and so now we're looking at an hourly rate for a lead person and maybe a helper, maybe even a team if you have two-man jobs. And then we can allot the overhead proportionally. Maybe we have one technician, maybe we have two technicians, right? And just depending on how that breaks up, that will change the overhead. And so these are all moving pieces. I mean, do you have one tech? Do you have two? Do you have one installation crew? What's your mix? Are you 50-50, 40-60, 70-30? And so all of this stuff can move, but if we kind of come in here and stay on top of this, then we can know, hey, this is the daily overhead that I have to assign for this particular department. Because if I have $335 and that's 1,000 hours on there, well, that's actually not the right one, is it? Yeah, divided by 8. So that would be an 8-hour day. Okay. So whatever that ends up being. Again, we've kind of added a few things to this and changed. And so I don't know that these formulas are worked all the way out. So don't use these as an example, as a completed example. Just the structure is accurate. Okay. You do your own math. Okay. And then the gray area is your vehicles. So we figured, for example, that your service technician, if he's 50% at 1,000 hours, then we know that maybe it's 40% at 800 hours is what we used here, right? Then we know what that hourly rate needs to be in order to cover our vehicle expense. So how that works is we take the vehicle, let's say, by the time you add your payments, your insurance, your maintenance, changing oil, occasional repair, this, that, and the other, it averages out to about $18,000 a year. Okay. So we divide that by how productive they are. Installation apartment is 1,500 hours, but they don't work by the hour. They work by the day, don't they? To do a change out. So if your average change out is 1 day, 1,500 divided by 8 hours would be about 188 jobs a year. So if we divide that truck into every job, we know that every job needs to pay right at $100 towards the vehicle. Actually, we include some fuel in here, and you can use this to calculate a trip charge, like maybe a half hour's worth of labor for that crew to drive over plus fuel, right? Maybe that's what that is. And in service, though, it's a little different. Now we have to take our $18,000 for vehicle and divide it by the billable hours. Now, the easy math would be divided by 1,000 hours. That would be $18 an hour. But we said, no, we're not quite as efficient. We got a lot of downtime. And so we're going to have to be at $22 an hour. So we can use that to figure our trip charge or even our diagnostic charge. And that's a subject for a different class, but that's how we do this. And so we come out with a daily rate for installs and an hourly rate for service. And then this is where these numbers you can actually calculate using your numbers, but don't use made up numbers. Use your numbers. And if you'd like to sit down and learn more about this, I'll put some. I need to put an online training on this, Donna, because usually I do this one-on-one because everybody's situation is a little bit different. But I'll put my link in here if you guys want to jump on a call and we can go through this until you get it. What I also did was this. I've got 2 spreadsheets that use this data. One of them is for calculating a replacement cost on your installs. One of them is for calculating the service. And depending on what these numbers are that you're putting in there, it's going to produce a different install price or repair price. And you can in full control of what kind of a net profit that you need to be pursuing. And I think you're really going to be surprised at how the pricing actually works out. And for so many people, they've gone up and away, and the pendulum has gone so far into these high margins that it's going to be coming back, right? And if you know these numbers really clearly, and you're able to adjust as your mix changes, right? Your production time changes. You know that if you're making less money in this month, you're going to have to make more money in that month to make it up, right? And so these are the kind of things that you can kind of keep your finger on that pulse and know where you are. But these fundamental exercises, these fundamental understandings allows you to adapt for the big bully that's coming. That's going to try to take your head off, right? You find yourself pinned with your arms behind your back, nowhere to go. You got this. So I've got those 2 spreadsheets that we utilize for that. And I utilize somebody else. They wrote this. I didn't write this because I don't write these programs. I'm not very good at Excel. What you saw there was my best work, right? But I am I am very familiar with how all this stuff works, and there's some software already out there that you can use. But understand, we're assigning the overhead to the labor because equipment don't put itself in anyway, right? The reason that they like to put a markup on equipment is it justifies the higher price things that people easily pay for, and you can put more overhead on that. And that makes sense, right? Because if you are on that service call and you go find a defective wire nut and you try to charge your customer $300 to replace a wire nut, they're going to go off on you. There's no value there. But if it were a solid state board instead, maybe even still under warranty, that would somehow more justifiable. You know what I'm saying? So the value and lack thereof is addressed by charging based on that as opposed to the actual direct cost. So we do have to calculate the direct costs. We do have to understand the value and how that correlates and how you can utilize that, especially as times get tighter. But when you understand what it actually costs you, it gives you a lot more power. And you can utilize this to actually strategize your company. How do I get more competitive in times where it's more competitive? What should my mix be? And how do I create a strategy in order to fulfill that so that I'm hitting my numbers when everybody else is just struggling to get by? And I'm suggesting that a lot of people are not going to get by. But those of you who have a strategy, we have the numbers part, and then we have your greatness part, being able to actually justify your numbers so that they go, wow, you're only charging this. I figured it would be more. You're a good deal. I'm going with you. Or these other companies do heating and air too, but you do this thing that I really want that they can't do. I'm going with you. That's the kind of thing that we're going to address here as we go through the process. Now, this is gold, right? This is your strategy for your marketing messages. Because you don't want to just be about promotions, do you? I mean, we need a little of that, but when everybody's talking, the emotion of money, then people start focusing on that. But there's other emotions that drive behavior. And I'm telling you, when times get tough, a lot of people are just going to be about the money, but a lot of other people are going to say, yeah, it's a lot of money, and I'm paying to do it once, and I'm paying to do it right. So I'll pay a little bit more than these other guys out there just to work with a professional in which I know it's done right, or a company that will stand behind it, or a company that will come back and service it and be here in business to warranty it, as opposed to these guys who are just trying to get by. And they may not even be in business in a year or two, especially with what's going on. So they're going to be looking for that type of customer is going to be looking for a certain type of heating and air conditioning business, as well as plumbing, as well as electrical, as well as any of the services out there. But because of our business type, we're in a position to operate a business when other small businesses are being shut down left and right, because the need has dried up, right? People are not going to have the discretionary income, I shouldn't say, that extra money each month to go do these things, to go to Disney, to go out to dinner, to go fly out, go on vacation, right? Services like vacation, tourist agencies, vacation agencies, whatever you call travel agencies, they are going to be, the first ones out. Cruise ships and cruise companies and stuff like that, they're going to be out. So, but you're essential services, and we figured that out back during the pandemic thing that we went through, and there's others to come. Bank on it, or they're going to try. So we got to pull together. We got to be informed. We got to be educated. But I hope you like this little tool. And that led me to the final thought. Almost forgot it. So as we take this tool and we have those numbers and we know how to manipulate those in our business so that we can be more competitive and still be profitable, we're just moving things around based on reality. We've got these two documents, one to figure service, one to figure repair. But what I did was I helped one or two customers that started like that create a single page flat rate for repairs. It ends up being, 4 or 5 pages, but just something simple so that if you're not in a position to go buy a flat rate, and there's good companies out there, New Flat Rate. I hear really good things about them. And I'm a big believer in flat rate. If you can afford those and it makes financial sense, that's the way to go. But maybe to get you started, you have to create your own. And so we did that. And we have different strategies. For example, maybe you want to have a low entry diagnostic fee, but you have to make that up in the repair. And so we calculate that precisely what that needs to be, in order to hit your net profit that you want. And or maybe you don't have that competitiveness in your market. You can get the full diagnostic fee, which may include your technician's time to drive over, the technician's time to set up and diagnose, the vehicle cost to drive over and the fuel costs associated with that, and the overhead that's attached to that, and hopefully a little bit of profit on that. So to pull in to do a diagnosis is pretty expensive. And generally we're doing it at break even at least, and sometimes at a loss that we have to make up in the repair. So we put these categories instead of doing it by every single component. We have these levels of repairs or categories of repairs. Anything in this repair is this amount of money. It becomes less about the part. Well, that's a $20 part. No, this is a level 1 repair. So that includes this, and any of those things. It's the company coming out, the technical experience and everything else to diagnose and resolve this issue. The part is irrelevant. The cost of the part is irrelevant. So, and it takes the focus off of that. And it's a better value builder. I hope that makes sense. So, shared some stuff with you here today, but starting with my story when I was out there, right, doing my martial arts. Actually, I love that my dad brought me up on that, and it taught me discipline. And it saved my butt in a number of ways, not just fighting, but falling. I was skateboarding one time and hit one of those rocks, but I was going so fast that I'm literally horizontal, getting ready to fall on my face. And because of all the martial arts training, I just dropped my right shoulder, curled my head under, tucked and rolled right out of it. Not a scratch. I think I got a little scratch on my shoulder from the rocks, but not bleeding or anything. Right. That was another one. And it was just things like that because of all the things that type of physical activity brought about, and the flexibility and limberness that was really advantageous in a number of situations. But yeah, Dad did me a solid by putting me in martial arts. He started when I was 9 years old, and I could do a split from the time I was 9. But then I got old and stiff, and now I can't even see my toes, let alone touch them. Or it feels like that. But it's always in there. That kind of stuff stays with you, even in your old age. I've seen videos on this, and I've had situations, nothing heavy, but there's a 65, 70-year-old man getting a punch thrown at him, and that training just kicks in. So get your training right on your business as well. We're not just talking about karate or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or mixed martial arts or anything. A lot of these are just universal truths. And right now, your family needs you, and the economy is going to be pretty painful. And so I want you to be prepared, and we need to work together, right? I know you guys watch this stuff for free over on YouTube, but why not sit in and actually take a training program and invest in yourself and spend a little bit of money, because that's the only way I get paid, and I don't charge much, guys. There's these big companies out there, and they're pushing this, that, and the other, and I get that. There's a place for that, but I work with guys from usually about less than 20 people, right? And a lot of people, they're just one-man operation, and they just said, I want to do this, I want to do it right. And what do we start with? We start with their marketing. We start making sure that, when you say, well, customers around here won't pay that, people around here don't like that, it's not everybody in your area. It's the people that you're attracting. So when you learn how to attract people who appreciate your value, now you're going to have success, because people are going to start to say yes, and they actually want what you're suggesting. You don't have to trick them into going with a high-end system or talk them into it. It's the right thing to do, and they get that. But that requires strategy, and it requires taking care of all the little things. And it's not easy running your own business, but you are in a position based on your skill set that you can run your own business. Imagine if your skill set was being a chef. You know what it costs to, let's say you're a gourmet chef and you're really good at preparing these new foods or whatever, and everybody loves your food, but you'll never realize that dream if you don't have the money to not only, set up a restaurant and market that and get the word out, a lot of money, but you have to stay in business long enough for the newness to wear off and the seats to start to fill up and get to that point. That's a lot of money. I mean, you could be talking, well over $1 million just to get something like this. I'm no restaurant expert, obviously, but well over $1 million just of investment. You can work out of whatever vehicle you have, in the evenings and weekends to get started. But just remember, when you do that, be really careful on how cheaply you charge, because the very customers that come to you for being cheap will leave you as soon as you raise your price. And so getting your pricing right and knowing your value and charging what you're worth is really important, because you can't just charge based on what it costs you. Okay. That doesn't get the bills paid in the long term. That's why value sales are so important. And it's the right thing to do. Not hustle people out of their money value, but true value of what it's worth and understanding what that is and feeling good about that. Looking the customer in the eye and say, that'll be $450. And that's a good price versus it's $450. Here's your bill, $450, because you have that internal conflict. We come out of the consumer side over into the business side with a consumer mindset. We have to build the business mindset. And it's exercises like the one I just shared with you that will help you do that. Do your exercises. Yeah. P. Ramsey here, HVAC Greatness. I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.